Good morning to you all and thank you for joining us. You're watching our mid-morning edition of Arirang News on this Tuesday, April 14th. Coming to you live from Seoul, I'm Shin Se-min. Before we begin, these are the stories topping the hour. President Moon Jae-in will be taking part in the virtual summit with the leaders of ASEAN, China, and Japan to solidify cooperation amid the COVID-19 pandemic. The World Health Organization is speeding up efforts to develop a COVID-19 vaccine to ultimately help bring the deadly virus under control. Plus, South Koreans will head to the voting booths tomorrow to pick out their representatives for the 21st National Assembly. And candidates are doing some last-minute campaigning amid the unprecedented situation caused by the outbreak. Our top story this morning, President Moon Jae-in will be connecting virtually with the leaders of ASEAN member nations, China and Japan on this Tuesday for talks on countering the COVID-19 pandemic. During the virtual summit set for this afternoon, President Moon will stress the need for regional cooperation. And Seoul's top office said President Moon will highlight the need to maintain global supply networks and allow essential human exchanges and travel to minimize the negative impact of the world economy. And he's also expected to suggest that the countries step up their cooperative healthcare efforts. And the leaders will adopt a joint statement following their session. And South Korea will be sending more locally produced COVID-19 test kits made to the United States in the next coming hours. The first such shipment follows a request from the U.S. President Donald Trump. Exactly 2 weeks ago, 3 test kit makers in South Korea received interim approval from the U.S. FDA. And the U.S. Federal Emergency Management Agency signed contracts with all 3 of them, with one of them having already shipped its products. And the other 2 are shipping their kits on this Tuesday. The quantity has not been disclosed upon agreement between Seoul and Washington, but Reuters reports some 600,000 kits will be sent on this Tuesday, followed by an additional 150,000 in the near future. And the deadly COVID-19 pandemic is setting records by the day. Coronavirus infections across the world passed the 2 million mark as of this morning, with the death toll rising fast, now almost at 120,000. And that U.S. accounts for about 30% of the entire reported cases worldwide. Some European countries are still being hit hard, but others might be finally coming out of the other side after a few tough months. Our Kan Hyung-woo reports.
The U.S. Navy reported on Monday the first death of a sailor assigned to the coronavirus-hit aircraft carrier Theodore Roosevelt. Almost 600 sailors on the nuclear-powered carrier have tested positive for COVID-19, with 92% of the 4,800 crew members tested so far. According to the Associated Press, more than 3,600 deaths in the U.S. have been linked to outbreaks in nursing homes and long-term care facilities. It reported that the latest count is up from about 450 deaths just 10 days ago. In Europe, some countries are still suffering the worst of COVID-19, while others are preparing to cautiously return to everyday life. Italy's coronavirus death toll has surpassed the 20,000 mark, becoming only the second country in the world after the U.S. to report the unwelcome milestone. Russian President Vladimir Putin has warned that Russia must prepare for the worst-case scenario after the country saw a record 2,500 new coronavirus cases in just one day. The UK and France are both extending their lockdown measures and their respective social distancing campaigns, with the number of COVID-19 cases and deaths still on the rise.
And I'm very sorry to say that 11,329 people have now died from coronavirus, every one of them a tragedy. So please, continue to follow the advice, now more than ever, to stay home, save lives, and protect our NHS.
However, Spain, one of the worst affected countries in the region, has lifted some restrictions on economic activity as the number of new COVID-19 cases and deaths appears to be on the downtrend. Germany is also considering gradually easing its own lockdown measures. Kan Hyung, Arirang News.
And the World Health Organization is speeding up efforts to make a COVID-19 vaccine available to the world. In a statement released on Monday, the UN health body said it was coordinating with a group of experts from diverse backgrounds. It said they would pull together in an unprecedented show of global corporate collaboration to develop a vaccine as soon as possible. The group, comprised of scientists, physicians, funders, and manufacturers, say that while a vaccine may take time to develop and test, it'll ultimately help bring COVID-19 under control. The WHO said the purpose was to unite global efforts and eliminate any inefficiencies and duplications during the R&D phase. South Korea's Central Election Management Committee says more than 14,000 polling stations across the nation will be completely disinfected by the end of the day, so they are ready for Wednesday's election. Other cautionary measures include temperature checks at entrances once voting starts and requiring voters to use hand sanitizers and wear plastic gloves. Anyone showing respiratory symptoms or a high fever will be guided to a separate voting booth, which will be disinfected as soon as they exit. On Wednesday, April 15th, the nation will head to the polling stations for South Korea's 2020 general election, even as the country fights tooth and nail to keep the COVID-19 outbreaks under control. And the guidelines have been crafted to keep voters safe, but many people are naturally concerned. With less than a full day of campaigning to go, our KIM Jae-hee takes a look at how the pandemic will surely be a major but unpredictable variable, both in terms of turnout and maybe even the result.
South Korea is holding a general election this year in the midst of a global pandemic. COVID-19 has engulfed the public's attention and has become a prominent factor in the 2020 general elections.
Elections have generally been about evaluation. They always constituted characteristics of judgment. But this year, COVID-19 has engulfed party politics. We may as well just call it the coronavirus election.
The pandemic has already had a significant impact on overseas voting. Many overseas polling stations have been suspended, resulting in a 23.8% voting rate, the lowest on record. In contrast, early voting has reached a whopping 26.69%, the highest rate so far. But observers of South Korean politics say it's important to keep an eye on the 50,000 in self-quarantine. The government has come up with a separate voting timeline for them for safety reasons, but it remains to be seen whether they'll show up.
Even if those under self-quarantine want to participate, they could feel self-conscious, as if they're posing a threat to others. The voting time being delayed to 7 p.m. isn't the problem. It's whether or not they'll show up to vote.
Adding to all these uncertainties that could affect the outcome of the election, conventional notions of voter turnout may not apply this year.
Normally, low voter turnout results from fewer young voters. Since they are mostly swing voters, fewer votes from them generally gives an advantage to the conservative opposition bloc. But this year, it may be the elderly that refrain from voting, since they're more vulnerable to the virus. So the conventional notion that low voter turnout may be advantageous to the conservative bloc simply cannot apply this time.
With all the uncertainty posed by COVID-19, the pandemic is bound to have an impact on the upcoming election. But just how much of an impact remains to be seen. KIM Jae-hee, Arirang News.
Despite the historic weekend deal struck between OPEC and some of the biggest oil producers in the world to cut oil output by 9.7 million barrels per day, U.S. President Donald Trump intervenes and says the new figures may be more than double that. Our Lee Seung-jae with more.
Just a day after the OPEC Plus group of oil producers agreed to cut output by 9.7 million barrels a day, U.S. President Donald Trump took to Twitter to hint that the deal may be more than double the initial agreement, a total of 20 million barrels a day. Touting his involvement in the negotiations, Trump says if such an agreement can be reached, the energy industry will be strong again when the world gets back to business from COVID-19. He also thanked Russia and Saudi Arabia for working with him to get things back on track. The decision to make further cuts may have come as U.S. markets shrugged off the initial cut. Market experts last week had stated that major oil producers would need to curtail crude production by 15 to 20 million barrels a day over the coming months in order to make up for a slump in demand due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Goldman Sachs also downplayed the initial agreement, saying no voluntary cuts could be large enough to offset the 19 billion barrels a day average demand loss expected for April to May. Meanwhile, according to Russia's Energy Minister Alexander Novak, the nation's oil companies agreed to the reduction under the OPEC Plus agreement after a meeting with Russia's energy ministry. He also stressed the U.S., Norway, and several other oil-producing countries have also announced their intent to reduce output to match the 20 million barrels a day cut. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
The Asian Development Bank is tripling the size of its coronavirus-related rescue loan package for developing member nations to $20 billion to help them fight the economic turmoil triggered by the pandemic. The bank's president said Monday that the agency is adding $13.5 billion to the initial $6.6 billion package it announced last month, as the economic impact is deemed more severe than previously thought. The ADB added that the $20 billion includes about $2.5 billion concessional and grant resources, saying the pandemic, quote, threatens to set back economic, social, and development gains in Asia and the Pacific. It's a dark and uncertain period for many people here in South Korea and around the world at this time. The number of people in the nation seeking unemployment benefits soared to a record high in March. And this comes as the worldwide COVID-19 pandemic laid waste to production and trade across the globe, slamming South Korea's exports, a key driver of its local economy. Among all industries, the lodging and food service sectors were hit the hardest. Our Kim Hyo-sun has more.
The COVID-19 outbreak has hit the South Korean economy hard, with the unemployment benefits paid last month hitting an all-time high. According to data released by the Labor Ministry on Monday, the amount of job-seeking allowance paid in March amounted to nearly $736 million. This amount of money is a whopping 40.4% surge from the same period last year. The number of people applying for the benefits also jumped almost 25% on-year in March, standing at 156,000. This was the largest on-year increase since March 2009, when the global economy was enduring the turmoil of the financial crisis. A majority of them were in the lodging and dining industries, at over 7,600. Significant harm was also inflicted on service businesses like tourism and healthcare. Seoul's Labor Vice Minister Im Seo-jung said Monday that the impact of COVID-19 is expected to be much worse for those in vulnerable situations, including daily hires and the self-employed who are not covered by employment insurance. The ministry also said it will be extending the E9 visa for foreign workers in the country until the end of June, as many businesses are facing difficulties in hiring them due to intensified border controls imposed to protect the public against the pandemic. Kim Hyo-sun, Arirang News.
Seoul City has conducted on-field inspections to prevent COVID-19 infections at call centers and resting facilities used by cleaning workers. According to the Seoul Metropolitan Government on Monday, city officials, labor supervisors, and labor attorneys visited 62 facilities earlier this month. And they offered advice on how to keep the workplaces disinfected while maintaining social distancing. And they also briefed workers on what types of financial support measures are provided by the city government and the central government and how to apply for them.
Good morning. Big ups and downs from the morning lows to the afternoon highs. In fact, Gyeongju and Daecheon had sub-zero morning lows this morning, but they will see highs jumping into 20s by the afternoon, feeling more like late April. And the capital region and Chungcheongdo provinces are still under dry weather advisories. No doubt that it's been a very dry spring day, so actually we could see spring blossoms longer than usual this year as no rain has made them fall off. Also, clear blue skies and good air quality will feature nationwide today. And if you enjoyed yesterday's afternoon warms, you will also enjoy today's as well, as most regions will have highs in the 20s this afternoon, except for Jeju Island. Rain is in the forecast on Friday, and that should ease the dryness in the air with readings to briefly drop at the end of the week. That's Korea for you, and here's the international weather for viewers around the globe.
And that does it for us at this hour. As always, thank you for watching and goodbye.